Welcome to Autism Knows No Borders, a podcast where people connected to autism inspire change and build community. Together with the Global Autism Project, I'm your host, Rachel Harmon, a professional with over a decade of experience in the field of autism services, outreach, and advocacy. Do you ever feel misunderstood? This episode is part 2 of my conversation with Terra Vance and Kate Jones, which was originally released on October 7th, 2021. Terra Vance is the founder of Neuroclastic, an autistic-led nonprofit organization that publishes articles by autistic writers and professionals advocating for autistic representation and human rights. Kate Jones is an artist and visual designer at Neuroclastic. In this episode, we discuss Damien Milton's theory, the double empathy problem, why Terra and Kate don't feel the need to uphold hierarchies and the status quo, how autistic people show empathy differently from non-autistic people, and how abstract communication can be confusing and lead to misunderstandings. In this episode, discover what's possible when communication breaks down both ways. And now, I present you Terra Vance and Kate Jones. We've mentioned on this podcast before the double empathy problem that was coined by Damien Milton in the early 2010s. Could you describe what that means for our listeners who are not familiar with it?
Yes. So, Simon Baron-Cohen, who's Sacha Baron Cohen's cousin, or Borat's cousin, he has been one of the, quote, top autism researchers, and all autistic people are so angry at him because he came up with this theory that autistic people are, quote, mind blind, which is so ridiculously offensive. It's hard to even talk about. So he said that autistic people cannot recognize the internal states of others and respond to them appropriately, and characterize autistic empathy as just a bunch of deficits. A lot of people read that in a very surface way, and so they equated it with their idea of what being a sociopath is. And so there is a lot of like pop psych and self-help, self-published books about autism, tons, hundreds, thousands, that basically equate autistic people with not being able to feel guilt or to care at all about other people. And Baron-Cohen didn't frame it that way so much, but that is just the way that people interpreted that. And all autistic people can tell you that because of our differences, other people often have a visceral negative reaction to us. We also have that same visceral negative reaction to them, but when we do it, they give us behavior therapy. They blame everything on us for this disconnect, and they call us defiant and say that we don't have empathy, which is absurd. So Damien Milton's double empathy is that you don't understand us if you're not autistic, in the same way that we don't understand you because we have a different, just internal set of rules for engagement. There are a lot of things that non-autistic people do that very much offend us or cause us to feel profound anxiety that don't make any sense. They make no logical sense anyway.
Could you give some examples, Terra?
All fads, whatever behavior is embarrassing, like stimming. These are social norms that have no logic behind them. And everything that non-autistic people do seem to be subconsciously upholding the status quo, right? So even when you look at making change, non-autistic people come up with solutions that are still socially acceptable. So they're not really usually solutions that break the status quo. But autistic people seem to be wired to not only not sense the importance of status quo and hierarchy. Like, why do you call the CEO sir or ma'am, but you call the custodian by their first name? And the custodians are supposed to call you Mr. or Mrs. whatever. You know, even Mr. and Mrs. Gender is a social norm that autistic people just don't have the same relationship to. What is the proper amount of deference that we're supposed to show to a police officer or a teacher when we do not feel those hierarchies of social merit that everyone else does? So, you know, even our non-autistic peers did this. They formed pecking orders as early as preschool and kindergarten and cut us out of them, but we don't perceive those pecking orders internally. We might eventually learn to play the games because everyone else is doing them, but that is not natural to us. So to say that we lack empathy, I have never understood why people love American football. I don't understand why people the size of refrigerators banging their heads into each other when you only have one brain. Like, why is it exciting to see two groups of large people running after a ball, an oblate spheroid made out of pigskin?
Giving themselves a TBI.
Yeah, giving yourself a TBI over a dead animal carcass. Like, none of that makes any sense to me. It seems absurd, but everyone does it and no one asks why is that absurd, except autistic people. We all, like, and that's not to say that autistic people can never love sports. Sometimes they do, especially sports statistics. I know some of those people who have them all memorized. But, you know, church, oh my goodness, religion. Almost all of us have totally deviated from our childhood religious practices. A lot. Or maybe switch religions totally, and we get kicked out of our families for not doing that. We get kicked out of our families because we can't stand their racism or their queerphobia. But it's all about upholding the status quo, the social Darwinism that everyone else has. So our empathy is totally intact. We totally understand each other. We don't begin our conversations with "How are you?" unless we actually are curious about how they really are. But we also don't ask because that's coercive. We're asking them to give information that they might not be in the mood to give. So we wait for them to say. If they think it's important, they'll tell us. And so we don't respond to telling someone, "Oh, that must have been so hard for you," when they tell us something hard that happened, because that is assuming their emotional states and that they want us to respond to their emotions. We don't want, I mean, some people, some autistics might, but in my experience and how I am and how Kate is, and we talk about this all the time, we don't want to validate each other's emotions. We want to see how close you can get to understanding what it's like. So if I tell you something and you don't have a child about how my child is extremely hyperactive, and you tell me about this time that you adopted a shelter puppy that chewed up all your furniture, I don't think that you are trying to one-up me. I think that you're saying this is as close as I can get to knowing what that's like. And I think of that as profoundly empathetic, because you're trying to tell me that you've heard me, that this is where you are, and then you're giving me permission implicitly to explain how they're not the same or how they're exactly the same. So we do this automatically. Other autistic people don't feel like that's being dismissive. We feel like that is being responsive because you're not trying to coerce. I don't understand why other people would tell me what emotions I have. Why would that help me in any way? Or how is that showing empathy? I want them to tell me how close they can get to where I am, so I know, how well are we really relating?
And also the fact that they would do that is such an act of care. Like when somebody looks inwards to, I always use the same example lately, but I had a bereavement just before Christmas, and it was a really big one, and it kind of kicked my ass a bit. And my neurotypical friends were great. They really were. They wanted to know if I wanted to talk about it and if there was anything they could do for me. And, they were brilliant. But my autistic friends had a different reaction to it. Their response was to tell me about the profound losses that they connected to in their lives and how those losses just broke them into 1,000 pieces, and then how they put their lives back together after, and what changed, and how it absolutely screwed up with their executive function. They kept getting lost on the way to make coffee because they just couldn't concentrate. I used to teach counselling skills to groups of counsellors who run a crisis intervention service. So with that in mind, I kept thinking about, with my new foundation, my new kind of, I'm autistic and these are my people, about how I had been taught to believe that the right way to respond to somebody who is sharing something about themselves is to ask more questions and to say, gosh, that sounds like it was really tough for you, and just keep delving into it and not really give anything from yourself, because the more neurotypical assumption is that when you do that, you're making it about you. That's the kind of belief that goes with that. You're taking the attention and you're making it about you. And that's where the double empathy problem comes in here in therapeutic relationships, because of that belief that is held by the neuromajority, that when you share something and someone else says, oh, I have a thing like that too, that's taking over. Mm-hmm. If you can separate yourself from that belief, from that way of viewing it, and say that to neurotypicals it can feel like that, but to neurodivergent people, it's not. What I felt when my friends shared their experiences of deep loss wasn't, you're making all this about yourself. It was, I'm not alone. I'm not alone in this. And you were really broken too. And your heart was shattered and you put it back together. And you care enough about me to revisit that pain in yourself in order to help me feel okay again. I mean, that's a gift. If that's a gift, if you can see it. But if all you want to see is, it's not how we do things around here, you've just made it all about you, then you'll miss the beauty of autistic empathy and autistic friendship and connection because of the double empathy problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is so well said. And I'd never heard it broken down like that. This is so helpful for me to actually understand and take your perspective.
Right. And I say this as somebody who has taught counselling skills, who has taught the very, very same problem that has affected me my whole life, because I was taught that there is only one way, which is deeply unempathic. If you only recognize your empathy as being empathic, then that's a pretty unempathic view on things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it doesn't sit well with me that for a lot of time I taught people to misunderstand autistic empathy, and I've got some making up to do to myself and to my community, sure.
And there is another thing that when an autistic person says, I'm really going through something, the other autistic person might start sending them ridiculous memes or funny YouTube videos, which might seem totally inappropriate to non-autistic people. If you are autistic and you tell someone something about, your personal suffering, and you're laughing, and they look at you and say, oh, I'm sorry, that must be so hard. That's really jarring to me. When I tell Kate about something that I'm going through that is really just a dumpster fire, which is often, that's kind of my baseline, is living in a dumpster fire in the middle of a wildfire. She will either make fun of me or she will send me really dark and nihilistic memes. And that not just Kate. This is, most of my autistic friends. We would never want to be like, hey, let's go have a spa date and a girls' night out. We usually would not even use the word girls because what in the world is gender anyway? So, we're not going to put together a spa package for each other unless they expressly state that that's what they want, which is fine. We totally do it then, but we get each other. And I get so exhausted trying to tell non-autistic people anything because they don't get it. They really don't. It's not their fault. They're wonderful. They're trying. But I don't share anymore at all with people unless I feel like they're going to be able to laugh with me, because I have a lot of hard circumstances in my life and that's how I deal with it. And it's not showing me empathy to feel sorry and pity for me. That's not what I need. So autistic people don't assume what each other needs. We wait and let them. And that's why we say a factual thing in response. We might say a factual thing about ourselves, or we might state a fact that we've read somewhere. But we don't say, we always put it in ourselves because it gives the other person total freedom to respond however they want. Mm-hmm. Without coercing them. Because if you say something about them, you're directing the conversation and you don't know what they need. Because as an autistic person, if you ask me questions, I answer them as a compulsion. Even if it's a rhetorical question, that's what autistic people do because you've led the conversation. My empathy is to give you enough room to lead things. And so when I speak about myself, I've not coerced you in a direction.
So earlier when you were talking about waking up in the middle of surgery and I said, that sounds really scary. What was going on in your head when I said that? Did that stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, and when you said it, I thought, wow, that was very NT.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're rude for it or anything like that. I know that you're trying, but like, if I said that to Kate, she would probably make fun.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So my reaction to that, so your gut reaction was, God, that's really scary. Mine was, I bet you really freak those people out.
Okay.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
In a private chat, Kate would have sent me if we were just talking, she would have sent me a meme of like a wrestler throwing chairs around or something to show like, just going full turbo on a bunch of people and scaring them to death. And then we would have laughed at that because that's really what happened.
But I feel like I need to point out, because I have told people I'm a therapist and I'm realizing I'm not looking like a great one right now in some in some context, is that this happens on the foundation of a friendship. We've spent time getting to know each other and we respond to each other as we know what we need from each other. There are other people who I would respond completely differently to. And I can do that because I have so much empathy, because I'm not immune to other people's minds and how they respond. I'm really attuned to how people react when I say things and how their body changes and how their energy shifts and how their face and their micro expressions are. If I try something out with somebody and it doesn't work, then that's not how I do it next time. If we really were so mind blind, why would we mask? Why would autistic masking be a thing? Both doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. The truth about autistic empathy is that we have so many mirror neurons that we feel it so intensely is that sometimes we can't engage with it, or we're paralyzed by it and we don't react in the way you think we're going to, or that you recognize as empathic. Mm-hmm. I say you, I mean, people out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the intensity of the empathy that means that we sit quietly with it or move past it because we don't want to place another demand. We know what demands mean for us, and we don't want to place another demand for emotional labor.
Mm-hmm. And that is a lot of times when we communicate, processing is really hard. It's not an automatic process for us, which means that we don't make a lot of assumptions. We do a whole lot of overthinking, which makes us really good citizens of the world because we consider everything profoundly. So when we talk to someone, we're doing what I call joint processing. So when I tell Kate something and then she tells me her experience, she's helping me to process what I don't always understand my feelings. I'm usually not trying to understand my feelings so much as trying to brace myself for what might be coming next, or to understand if something was fair. See, I've been gaslighted my whole life like every other autistic person. And so another thing that an autistic person will regularly do is, instead of responding to your emotion and saying that must have been really hard, they'll say that was really unfair. That person was being a jerk. That person was not observing your boundaries. Or they might be telling you, asking you questions to help understand, like, it's not to drill you, it's to help you process so that you can fully understand why this person with these totally different rules did this thing. So when we're asking questions, it's not to be invalidating, it's to help you process, like, because we don't know, have I misread this? So other autistic people know what that's like, and we're asking questions to help clarify. So we might go through something and joint process it from every angle, and it would look exhausting to non-autistic people. It might look like an argument, but we're really like reducing the other person's burden of cognitive and emotional labor by helping them consider all these angles so that they're not processing the same thing for 3 years. Mm-hmm. So that is a really social and really empathetic way to respond to autistic people. But when we do that with non-autistic people who understand the world in gists and approximations and vagueness and automatic everything, then they usually see it as us being nitpicky or interrogating them, or, so there's just this lifetime of, because we're the minority, because there are more of other people, they get to just blanket accuse everything that we do of being a deficit. Mm-hmm. And that's really messed up.
Hey, Rachel here. Do you know anyone else who might benefit from listening to this episode? Maybe an autistic person wanting to grow their community, a parent wanting to support their loved one, or a professional wanting to develop their skills. I encourage you to share this episode if you'd like to help them out. And now, back to the conversation.
I think often autistic adults are accused of, or are spoken about as being really angry and combative. And some of that is about how we're perceived, how our communication is perceived. But some of it is just like, yeah, we're tired. We're tired of being perceived as being something we're not. And then you can only, after a while of trying to explain, you start to actually get kind of angry. But nobody asks why we're angry. They just they dismiss our anger, which is often righteous. So I guess I would love to see people saying, hang on, autistic adults are angry about this. Given that they've got such a lot to do, why would they spend so much time being so angry about this particular thing? What is it? Why is this so important? Because we're very pragmatic. If we've decided that we're angry about a particular thing, there'll be a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So back to the language and the communication, I know that some autistic people
can be very direct, very blunt, like no filter, and also prefer things very concretely and with clear expectations. Like Terra, you were talking about the vagueness that neurotypicals kind of use in communication. And can you elaborate more on that and why this kind of abstract way of communicating can be really confusing and why it can lead to a lot of misunderstanding?
Sure. We see this the most in parent groups where parents are coming to ask autistic people for advice about their kids. And they'll begin with a behavior that their kid is doing and an assumption of why. Or they'll just say, my kid's really been so disrespectful. I'll give an example. So there was a parent of an older teenager who was saying that her child is really disrespectful, her son. And she said that she asked him just to load the dishwasher. And I did a thing online that it had thousands of comments on social media from autistic people. So none of this is ever just me having my own thoughts. I liaise with thousands of autistic people every single day. So I would never just say this is what autistic people largely do without creating my own body of evidence every single day of my life. No days off ever, at least 10 hours a day. So autistic people, I put this scenario that I saw a parent type up. I changed some details so that I wouldn't, if they ever found it, it wouldn't put them on the spot too much. But this parent had believed that when her son offered to wash the dishes, that he was just arguing with everything. Like he couldn't just do a simple thing that she asked. And when I kind of I put the conversation online, autistic people were like, well, yeah, he cares about the environment. The dishwasher wasn't full. So he told his mom, it's not full yet. Should I wash them in the sink? And she says, no, I want the dishwasher run. I need clean dishes for dinner. And he says, well, I'll just wash those things that you need. And she gets more and more angry. She sees him countering her as just being disrespectful. And then he mentions the environment. And she's like thinking that he's trying to call her a hypocrite. But all autistic people saw this conversation, like thousands, and were like, they understood that she really just wanted simplicity and they weren't communicating well. She just wanted it over with. But he believed that she had the same level of dedication to the environment that he did because she says she did. And so that, even when people are politically the same, autistic people are usually much more dedicated, much more concrete with their morality. And I don't mean that as rigid. We are very much moral relativists. But when we know that something is going to have a negative impact on the future, even if it's a small one, we still care and we still try. So this person was just trying to be empathetic, but the parent thought that they were being disrespectful. But it took a lot of questions from autistic people to get the parent to explain what was really happening. We usually aren't ever being passive aggressive. People read us that way. Autistic people ask for that kind of specificity because the details will always give you the answer. For autistic people and non-autistic people can't move past their cognitive dissonance usually enough to really get us. It takes a long time and a lot of study. We've had however many years of life we are old. That's how many years we've had of studying non-autistic people to understand them. And so they think that they have this empathy and they get everyone. And the more empathy someone feels like they have, the worse they are for us because they just think they get it. Because that's what empathy is. and emotional intelligence too. That is what determines your career success and career health more than your level of knowledge or your talent or your work ethic or your integrity is your quote emotional intelligence. And that really means how well can you respond to people to uphold the existing power structures and status quo. That's really, if you filter it down and study it and break it down enough. And when you tell people that, they get really angry. But autistic people are doing things because they're logical and ethical and practical. And that means that you really need specificity. And that would help a lot to also reduce racism and queer phobia and xenophobia and just cultural differences and socioeconomic differences. If we were more specific and we stopped doing things, by our own internal heuristics, which is what empathy is. And that's why people flock to like people. That's why when you go into a school cafeteria and you will see these divisions and their racial and their class, because empathy is really like understanding people who have a lot of really similar experience, but autistic people are not like that. Your friends tend to be so extremely different from us in complementary ways. We don't need or want them to be like us because we don't need to uphold any status quo or social norms. And so we don't need to uphold any invisible hierarchies. And so we need that specificity so that everyone can have their own cultural norms and their own class norms, and we can troubleshoot how are these things inaccessible and inequitable. So yeah, autistic empathy would be amazing for the whole world to learn and model what we're doing, because it would go so far to just obliterate all the inequities in the world. It just hit me like autistic kids and adults often have one really close friend for a really long time or just a few. And like when Kate and I are talking, we might say a really deep and profound thing, and the other person responds with one word from like, that is a signal from a conversation we had a year and a half ago. And so, we were talking about autistics we kind of have an all or nothing memory. So what we record, we might store forever, especially if it's important. And so it's really showing a profound empathy that when we respond to the other person with just one word, it's like, yeah, here, I recognize the pattern in this, and I have paid attention to you, and I remember this very highly specific thing from a long time ago.
Example. I know that you don't panic. It's fine.
No, I can't wait for this.
I know that you don't really celebrate your birthday so much, but I know that your special interest is Moby Dick, right? So yeah. I did what any really good friend would do and completely ignored Terra's birthday. That's friendship for you. And then on the publication anniversary of Moby Dick in the US, which is different to the publication date in the UK, I found this out when I was going on my deep dive. A friend and I sent Terra some flowers because that would be like a date that's acceptable to celebrate something amazing that's happened, with a quote from Moby Dick on the card. And the quote was, now bearing in mind, I had to find a florist, do you call them florists? Yeah, a florist on the internet in Virginia from the UK and persuade them that this was okay. So I got this florist to write, "From hell's heart I stab at thee," and then send these flowers to this person who wouldn't then take out a restraining order because that's autistic friendship. But yeah, I was like having this conversation online with the florist saying, no, it's okay. I know this is going to be weird. And they're like, okay, so what's a phone number? I'm like, I don't know. I've never met her. They're like, so tell me again. Tell me again what we're doing. Yeah.
And it was like weed flowers too. It wasn't like roses.
So it was like some really nice wild Well, I decided that roses would be awful, so it had to be kind of like wildflowers. I was going for a particular vibe. So it involved quite a specific search online and then a very strange conversation.
And now I have that card. I have like 5 things on my mantle in my bedroom over my fireplace that are like my favorite things in the world. And that From Hell's Heart, I Stab at Thee card is up there on display. It was like my favorite thing ever. And that will make no sense to non-autistic people, and they would probably find it terrifying.
I see it as a beautiful sign of your friendship, that you guys get each other and you're able to send each other things like that.
Yeah, because if it mentioned emotions at all, I would be like, are you drunk? What are you doing, Kate? Like, did you forget? Have you ever met me before? So, yeah, I think that our remarkable capacity for men.
Thanks for tuning in to Autism Knows No Borders. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and come back next Thursday for part 3 of this conversation, where we discuss ABA therapy, special interests, and how to be a better ally to the autistic community. Thanks for listening. Take care.